A bus was speeding through a red light intersection. The driver could see the red light approaching. An instinct from over a decade of driving told him to ease off the accelerator and put his foot on the brake pedal. But a cold, sharp dagger was touching the driver's neck. At this moment, the only hope to change the situation was the police dog lying behind him. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city's busy streets, illuminating the bright yellow bus that wound its way through congested avenues. In the driver's seat sat Gabriel Myers, a man with kind eyes and firm hands, who had navigated these routes for over a decade without incident. Today, however, would test not only his skills, but also his courage. A figure loomed behind him, a middle-aged thug, thin and brutal, clutching a knife so tightly that his knuckles shone white. The criminal hissed menacingly in Gabriel's ear, ordering him to keep driving and never slow down, especially with the flashing lights of police vehicles visible in the distance. Gabriel swallowed hard. He could see red lights approaching ahead, and every instinct told him to ease up on the gas, but the cold dagger pressed against his neck made him hesitate. His mind raced, trying to calculate the safest way to handle the volatile situation. As he glanced in the large overhead mirror, his eyes fell on a large, calm shape sprawled in the aisle, a German shepherd named Hunter. The dog lay with its head between its paws, its muscles clearly curled up beneath its sleeping appearance. Hunter was no ordinary dog. He was a retired police K9, trained to stay alert even in the most dangerous scenarios. Hunter's ears perked up, and he zeroed in on the thug brandishing the knife. In that moment, Gabriel felt a flicker of hope stir in his chest. If anyone could turn the tables on this armed assailant, it was Hunter. On the way into town, Sophie and Hunter had found their usual seat near the back of the bus. The driver, Gabriel, had recognized them instantly. Hunter was hard to miss, with his imposing size and noble huntering. Sophie offered Gabriel a friendly smile as they boarded. Hunter leaned forward to sniff the driver's outstretched hand, then wagged his tail in a friendly manner. Hunter followed Sophie to a window seat. She put in her earphones, quickly losing herself in a favorite playlist. Hunter lay by her feet, eyes half closed, but ears attuned to the hum of the engine, the chatter of passengers, and dangerous actions may arise. For the first few miles, the ride was peaceful. The bus rattled and squeaked as it navigated tight turns and crowded lanes. Sophie scrolled through her phone, responding to a few messages and playing a casual game. Hunter let his gaze roam over the passengers, students, an elderly couple, a few office workers. Nothing seemed out of place, and his posture relaxed fractionally. But that sense of peace was broken after 2 stops when a man boarded the bus. He wore a low baseball cap pulled down over his eyes and kept his chin tucked into his jacket collar, as though he wished to remain invisible. Hunter's ears pricked up immediately. The dog's eyes followed the man all the way to his seat, noting every detail. The subtle tremor in his hands, the darting glances he cast at the other passengers as if sizing them up. Something about him screamed danger. No one else seemed to notice right away. Most of the passengers were lost in their thoughts, staring at phone screens or gazing out the window. Yet Sophie sensed Hunter's sudden vigilance. She murmured soothingly under her breath, lightly scratching behind his ears in an attempt to calm him. Even so, Hunter remained rigid, eyes locked on the newcomer. The dog's shoulders tensed with each jolt of the bus, as if preparing to leap into action at any moment. A few minutes later, the situation intensified when the bus stopped again. Another man climbed aboard, this one in a dark hooded sweatshirt. He didn't just glance around. He scanned the interior as though searching for a familiar face or confirming something suspicious. His posture was stiff, his lips pressed into a firm line. On spotting the first young man, he moved down the aisle in a rush and took the seat beside him. Their heads bent close as they exchanged low whispers, occasionally throwing furtive looks around. Both men appeared agitated, their legs bouncing with anxious energy. Hunter's hackles rose visibly, thick fur bristling along his spine. That telltale sign made Sophie's own pulse quicken. She reached for her phone, not sure whether to dial her father or alert the bus driver. She had seen Hunter spring into action before. His instincts were rarely wrong. When he reacted this strongly, it almost always signaled real trouble. Sophie tried to gauge the reaction of other passengers, but most remained blissfully unaware. An older woman near the front was dozing, while a trio of teenagers laughed together, oblivious to the tension growing in the middle of the bus. Sophie noticed the driver glancing in the rearview mirror with a slight frown. It seemed he too had spotted something unusual about the pair huddled in conversation. Suddenly, the first man pulled at his jacket collar, revealing the edge of a faded tattoo on his neck. Sophie saw Hunter's ears flick as he picked up the change in the man's scent or posture. The second man leaned over the seat in front of him, rummaging through a small duffel bag. Sophie couldn't see what he was looking for, but the way he zipped the bag closed so gently that no one would notice. Their conversation grew more urgent. She caught snatches of words like timing and police in hushed tones. She began to feel stressed. Whatever plan they were discussing, it clearly involved something illegal or dangerous. A middle-aged passenger across the aisle finally glanced up, sensing the men's tension. However, he quickly returned to scrolling through his phone. Sophie felt more alone than ever, except for the steady presence of Hunter at her side. She laid a comforting hand on his back, feeling the vibration of a low, almost inaudible growl reverberating through his chest. If these men posed any real threat, Hunter was ready to act. Sophie only hoped they wouldn't give him reason to. What will happen next in this exciting story? If you want to know what Hunter Dog will do, then hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and continue the story. Sophie quietly turned off her music and pulled out her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she sensed the shift in the bus's atmosphere. She quickly typed a message to her dad. Hunter is losing his cool. Her eyes darted over to the front of the bus, where two men had just boarded. They were huddled together, speaking in hushed, urgent voice while glancing furtively around the bus. Almost immediately, Ryan replied with a terse query. What exactly is Hunter doing? Without hesitation, Sophie described the dog's posture in vivid detail. His eyes were locked onto the men, ears pricked forward, and his body was coiled like a spring, every muscle tense with alertness. That was all Ryan needed to confirm her fears. Hunter was sensing a real threat. As she prepared to document the situation, the bus jolted slightly over a pothole, causing a few passengers to murmur nervously. Sophie, determined to capture every detail, discreetly angled her phone toward the suspicious pair. One of the men ran a hand through his hair, as if to mask his anxiety, while the other adjusted the collar of his jacket, his eyes scanning the bus as if searching for an escape route. For a brief moment, one of the men even glanced directly at a group of chatting teenagers, who immediately fell silent under his steely gaze. Not wanting to miss a critical moment, Sophie snapped several photos despite the shaking of her hands. In one shot, she saw a flash of light hidden in the man's coat pocket, an indication of a weapon hidden from plain sight. In another, the low light of the bus illuminated the cold determination on their faces. She could hear the soft rustling of papers and murmurs of concern from nearby passengers, all while the bus driver cast a wary glance in the rearview mirror. Sophie hit send on the pictures, and almost instantly, Ryan's reply lit up her screen. Upon opening the images, Ryan felt a stab of shock and a surge of anger. These were the two men he had been tracking for years, members of a notorious gang that had long eluded him during his time on the force. The photos confirmed what his instincts had long warned him. These men were ruthless, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous. An old, simmering anger flared within him as he recalled past cases, his fingers flying over the keyboard to type back an urgent command. "Get off at the next stop. No questions asked," he wrote, his tone leaving no room for argument. Meanwhile, the tension inside the bus was escalating further. A nervous passenger in the back began whispering to a companion about the unusual behavior of the new arrivals, while a mother clutched her child protectively, her eyes wide with fear. The bus driver, noticing the escalating commotion, subtly increased his vigilance, his brow furrowed in concern as he kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the gear shift, ready for any sudden maneuvers. Every second in that tense interval amplified the sense of impending danger. The atmosphere inside the bus was charged with a mix of fear and disbelief, and Sophie felt as though she were caught in a slow-motion film of unfolding chaos. Her heart pounded in her ears as she continued to document the situation, every detail etched in her memory. In that moment, it was clear that this ordinary bus ride had transformed into a critical juncture, a race against time where every snapshot and every message could mean the difference between safety and disaster. When the bus pulled into the next stop, Sophie's heart pounded as she mustered the courage to stand. She kept her voice as light as possible while telling the driver that this was suddenly her stop. As she moved toward the door, she carefully navigated around the two suspicious men seated near the back, giving them a wide berth. Their murmured conversation and furtive glances barely acknowledged her presence, a detail that, while unnerving, she took as a good sign for her safe exit. With tentative relief, she stepped off onto the bustling sidewalk, the cool air a stark contrast to the stifling tension inside. In that moment, as she exhaled a long, shuddering breath she hadn't realized she was holding, she reached instinctively to pat Hunter's head, a familiar, comforting ritual that had always soothed her worries. But in a heartbeat, a cold jolt of terror struck her. Hunter wasn't by her side. Instead, he remained on the bus. Sophie's eyes widened in disbelief as she saw, through the widening gap between the open door and the departing vehicle, that the doors hissed shut and the bus pulled away, leaving her stranded at the stop with a gnawing sense of dread. Around her, a small cluster of onlookers paused in their own business, a street vendor packing up his wares, a group of teenagers whispering anxiously, and an elderly passerby clutching his coat close. Panic seized her, and without a moment's hesitation, her trembling fingers dialed Ryan. "Hunter stayed on the bus. He's not coming with me," she blurted urgently into the phone, her voice wavering between disbelief and fear. Almost immediately, Ryan's calm and measured response crackled through the line. He reassured her not to worry, emphasizing that Hunter was the best trained partner he had ever known, and if the dog had chosen to remain on board, there was undoubtedly a critical reason behind it. Still shaken, Sophie's mind raced as she scanned her surroundings. A passing cyclist nearly collided with her, and a nearby pedestrian offered a concerned glance, but no one could quite fathom the extent of her terror. The sound of distant sirens began to swell in the background, mingling with the low murmur of concerned voices from bystanders who were starting to piece together snippets of the earlier commotion. With a trembling hand, Sophie redialed 911. Her voice cracked as she relayed every detail Ryan had shared about the gang members on the bus, the palpable danger that lingered in every whispered word and tense glance. The dispatcher's voice was steady and reassuring, confirming that patrol cars were already en route, alerted by Ryan's call. As Sophie ended the call, she felt a momentary glimmer of relief, quickly replaced by a flood of anxious thoughts. Should she wait here for help or try to catch up to the bus? Was it safe to even consider returning? In the midst of her inner turmoil, she noticed a small cluster of police officers converging on the area, their presence a silent promise of protection. Meanwhile, the hum of urban life continued around her. A street musician started playing a soft, melancholic tune on his guitar, the sound oddly comforting amid the chaos. A nearby coffee shop had its door open, and through the window, patrons watched the scene with sympathetic expressions. Yet Sophie couldn't shake the lingering fear and the overwhelming responsibility she felt for Hunter. Her eyes darted back to the receding bus, its taillights flickering like distant warnings in the twilight. Meanwhile, Ryan's heart pounded as he tossed his wrench aside and dove into the driver's seat of his rugged Jeep. He slammed the door shut and peeled out of his garage, tires squealing on the pavement as he sped through suburban streets. Every turn and twist of the road seemed to echo memories of past high-stakes moments, foot chases in narrow alleys, tense stakeouts in shadowed parking lots, and near misses that had once left him gasping for breath. As he navigated the maze of dimly lit roads, Ryan dodged a stray dog that bolted across his path and narrowly avoided a cyclist weaving unexpectedly through traffic. Every yellow light he encountered was met with a surge of adrenaline as he accelerated, determined to close the distance before the situation spiraled any further. At one particularly busy intersection, a school bus full of chattering children came to a sudden stop ahead. Ryan slammed on his brakes for a split second, his heart hammering in his chest as he narrowly avoided a collision. His mind raced. Not only was he reliving old, dangerous memories, but he was now focused entirely on Hunter and the urgent need to stop these criminals once and for all. The image of Hunter's determined eyes flashed in his mind like a beacon, pushing him to keep going despite the chaos unfolding around him. Back at the police station, the atmosphere was equally charged with urgency. Ryan's old colleagues had already mobilized into action. In the cramped operations room, a flurry of activity ensued. 2 patrol cars barreled down the main road, their sirens shrieking and blue lights strobing against the drab cityscape. Officers barked orders over crackling radios, coordinating their efforts with a precision born of years on the job. In one corner of the room, a seasoned sergeant huddled over a map marking the bus's last known location, while a young dispatcher frantically relayed live updates about the unfolding situation. Inside the bus, Gabriel gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles blanched, his entire body trembling with each jolt of the engine. The thug with the knife barked harsh orders, insisting that Gabriel keep going, faster and faster, while his voice was drowned out by the frantic beeps of a warning horn from a nearby car. Gabriel's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, catching fleeting glimpses of red and blue lights flashing ominously behind them, along with the distorted reflections of angry, cursing criminals. Outside, shouts of rage mingled with the screeching tires of the pursuing patrol cars. At that moment, Gabriel's gaze locked with Hunter's. The loyal German shepherd was slowly inching forward in the aisle, lowering his body until it nearly touched the floor. Every passenger seemed frozen in a state of suspended terror as Hunter moved with a deliberate, almost imperceptible slowness. The dog's eyes burned with an intense, unwavering focus, a silent command. Stay calm. Wait for my signal. Meanwhile, a young woman near the back clutched her purse so tightly that it threatened to burst open, and an elderly man murmured desperate prayers under his breath, adding to the chorus of anxiety within the confined space. Gabriel's pulse pounded in his ears as he battled the urge to slam on the brakes, a move that could trigger further chaos if the knife pressed against his throat. Each time the red and blue lights flashed in the mirror, his heart raced, and he imagined the patrol cars surging forward to rescue them all. Yet the grim reality was that one wrong move could turn the bus into a rolling hostage situation, endangering not just him, but every single passenger on board. As Gabriel wrestled with his terror, a sudden commotion erupted at the front of the bus. A child began to cry uncontrollably, the sound piercing the heavy tension like a desperate alarm. A middle-aged passenger tried to comfort the child, but the effort only added to the pandemonium. Simultaneously, a man in a business suit attempted to discreetly dial 911, his fingers trembling as he hoped to alert someone to their dire situation without drawing the thug's attention. Through it all, Hunter's determination remained unshaken. His silent confidence and poised readiness were a stark contrast to the swirling panic around him. The dog's ears pricked, and his tail remained motionless, every fiber of his being tuned to the situation. In a heartbeat, Gabriel's eyes registered the potential of Hunter's presence. The K9 was now close enough that, with one powerful leap, he could reach the armed man and neutralize the threat. As the bus headed straight towards the next intersection, the light flickered from green to yellow. The two criminals erupted in frantic shouts for Gabriel to step on the gas, determined not to let the pursuing patrol cars box them in. Gabriel's mind spun with anxiety. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he glanced once more in the rearview mirror. That was when he saw Hunter's posture change. The big German Shepherd dug his front paws into the floor, muscles coiled, ears flattened against his skull. There was an unmistakable fire in the dog's eyes, an unwavering focus that told Gabriel this was the moment. With no further warning, Gabriel slammed on the brakes. Tires screeched, the bus bucked like a bronco, and the smell of burnt rubber filled the air. Passengers screamed as momentum hurled them forward, many crashing into seats and one another. The thug who had been leaning over Gabriel's shoulder, knife at the ready, was flung off balance. He staggered across the aisle, arms flailing wildly in a desperate attempt to stay upright. In that split second, Hunter sprang into action. Launching himself with a powerful leap, he covered the distance between them in midair. The sheer force of Hunter's body crashing into the thug's torso sent the man sprawling backward with a bone-jarring thud, and the knife clattered to the floor, spinning beneath the rows of seats. A deep, ferocious snarl tore from Hunter's throat as he pinned the criminal to the ground. Front paws braced against the man's chest. At the same time, a passenger in the back shrieked when she saw the second criminal lurch to his feet. He had been eyeing the rear exit, hoping to slip away in the chaos. In a panicked bid for freedom, he shoved past an elderly gentleman, nearly knocking him into the nearest row of seats. The man clung to the metal handrail, eyes wide in fear. The thug lunged for the door, fumbling to yank it open before the bus completed its abrupt stop. But Hunter, aware of every threat, twisted his head the moment he heard the scuffle at the rear. Leaving the first thug gasping in pain, the German Shepherd spun around with lightning speed. His claws scraped against the bus floor as he bounded down the aisle, instantly closing the gap. Passengers cowered, pressing themselves against the backs of seats to avoid the dog's powerful sprint. The second thug glanced over his shoulder with terror. He'd seen what Hunter had just done. He knew there was little hope to outrun a trained K9. Still, desperation drove him onward. Before he could even reach the door's release handle, Hunter leapt at him with teeth bared, clamping down on the man's jacket sleeve. The dog yanked him backwards so forcefully that the criminal's legs swept out from under him, sending him crashing to the bus floor. A collective gasp rippled through the shaken passengers. Some stood to get a better look, while others shielded their eyes, fearing gunfire or more violence. Yet Hunter's training shone through. He held the second man down, his growl echoing through the bus with a clear warning. "Don't move." The thug squirmed, hands scrambling for purchase, but one glance at the dog's snarling muzzle ended any notion of escaping. The entire scene, from Gabriel slamming the brakes to both criminals being subdued, happened in a matter of seconds, leaving the hijackers stunned, the passengers breathless, and Hunter poised like a seasoned warrior awaiting the final cue. The bus screeched to a stop with a loud hiss of brakes and a final jolt, sending a ripple of startled cries through the vehicle. Outside, the patrol cars had formed an impenetrable barricade, their flashing lights and blaring sirens cutting through the chaos like twin beacons. Police officers in full tactical gear flooded in, guns drawn and voices booming orders that reverberated off nearby buildings. Amid the tumult, Gabriel raised his trembling hands high, his eyes wide with terror, as he pleaded silently that he was a hostage, not a threat. Nearby, a middle-aged woman clutched her purse tightly, her eyes darting around as she was gently ushered to safety by a vigilant officer. Inside the bus, the scene grew even more complex. An officer quickly approached the row of seats where a young child sat, huddled under a blanket, ensuring the child was unhurt before moving on. In the midst of the unfolding turmoil, another passenger, a visibly shaken elderly man, murmured a prayer under his breath. At that precise moment, all eyes were drawn to Hunter. With his jaws still clamped firmly on the second criminal's coat, he thwarted any desperate bid for escape. Not far away, the first thug lay sprawled on the floor, coughing violently and cradling his ribs, evidence of the brutal impact that had knocked the wind right out of him. Scattered around him were shards of broken glass and a few personal belongings that had fallen during the commotion. In a matter of seconds, the officers had both suspects in custody. They quickly disarmed the men, cuffed them securely, and began questioning them. It quickly emerged that these men were members of a notorious, wanted gang, likely in the midst of a desperate escape when they boarded the bus. The palpable tension in the air dissipated gradually, replaced by collective sighs of relief from the frightened passengers. An officer directed the bus driver to remain calm and stay on the scene, while forensic technicians began photographing every detail of the interior. Then, amidst the chaos that was going on, stepping out through the open bus doors, Hunter moved with an air of confident calm. Standing just outside was Ryan, his rugged Jeep parked at an awkward angle behind the police cruisers, its engine idling softly. Beside him stood Sophie, her face flushed with relief and eyes still wide with residual shock. The moment Hunter stepped off the bus, tail wagging furiously in excitement and relief, Sophie dropped to her knees and threw her arms around the massive dog, overcome with gratitude. Ryan quickly joined in, patting Hunter's sturdy neck and murmuring words of heartfelt thanks. At the back, medical staff rushed to check on any passengers who might have been injured during the sudden stop. An officer reassured a trembling bystander that the situation was now under control, while another directed a cluster of onlookers to a safe distance. As the community gathered to offer gratitude and support, news of the heroic actions spread, reminding everyone that courage and loyalty can shine through even the darkest moments. With the threat neutralized and the promise of a safer future on the horizon, a sense of hope and resilience filled the air, a lasting testament to the power of unity and the enduring spirit of those who stand up for what is right. What does this story make you think about? Please share your feelings with us in the comments section. Subscribe to the channel so we can notify you when there are new videos.